Wednesday, back at the Encore. Such a beautiful property, this Encore. This is where Boosie and I spent most of this past weekend. I mentioned very briefly in the previous video that I uploaded that there was an event going on here this previous weekend hosted by Unibet. They were hosting a series of tournaments here at the Wynn. One of the tournaments that Unibet was hosting was an invitational sit and go. The original idea for this sit and go was to have 9 eSports heroes, 3 top prizes, 5K, 3K, and 2K. So first, second, and third place get paid. One-day event, 9-handed sit and go. The day before the event, one of the organizers at Unibet sent me a message to say that one of the eSports heroes had dropped out. He wasn't going to be able to make it, wasn't going to play in the event. They needed somebody to fill that last spot. Reached out to me to see if I was available, and sure enough, I was available. I was definitely not going to say no to the invitation. These guys were all awesome. All of them were super cool, super nice people. The Unibet guys, they ended up making a really cool recap video of that day, of the sit and go. So I'm going to insert that right here, right now. Check it out. We won. I won the event, first place. So the weekend could not have started out any better. It was a super fun event. When it got down to 4-handed, I made a suggestion of maybe moving $500 from first place into fourth place. It was a really fun event. I think everyone enjoyed their time. I enjoyed my time as well. So 4.5K for first place there, and that was awesome. So that was about as fun of a start to a weekend as you could imagine. Felt pretty lucky to have gotten an invitation from the Unibet guys, and then to end up taking down a pretty high variance sit and go with a very fast structure, and to meet a bunch of awesome people along the way. That was a blast. That was a really fun day, really fun night. And then, as we all know, the weekend took a turn for the much, much worse. And here we are Wednesday, only 3 days later since all hell broke loose here in Las Vegas. And what started off as about as fun of a weekend as you can imagine, the very exact opposite happened. The weekend ended with a total nightmare scenario for the entire city. Obviously, it's going to take a very long time for a sort of you know, sense complete feel of normalcy around here, and we're nowhere near that at the moment. I have at least one good friend who has good friends that are still in the hospital right now, and we're hoping for the best, but we don't really know how that's going to work out. But that person is for sure on my mind, and I know a lot of other people are on a lot of other people's minds here around the city. This is a pretty small community here in Las Vegas. Obviously, there were people at that concert from all over the country and perhaps from other countries as well. So I don't think there's any misgivings about this only affecting Las Vegas, obviously. But yeah, it's a very small community here in Las Vegas. It's a city that has an enormous reputation, but is actually a much smaller town than that reputation would suggest. So yeah, it's gonna take a very long time to sort of move beyond this, but it's a balancing act for now. It's somewhere in between trying to stay positive and you know, look at how awesome the community has been in terms of coming together and you know, doing blood drives, blood donations, as well as donating some funds to the victims' families because that's very much needed. On the flip side of that is trying to find solutions and coming up with ideas and ways to you know, prevent this sort of thing from happening if possible in the future. Of course, nobody wants to you know, dive too deep into that too quickly, and that's understandable. And there's also the fact that people with jobs, they have to go back to work. Life continues in some fashion, one way or another. Life continues. It's very weird to be I guess going back and sitting at the poker table as if that matters, as if poker hands, hand histories matter when compared to something like that. When compared to something like this that happened earlier this week, feels very inconsequential. But I guess that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go into the poker room here at the Encore. We're gonna sit in a poker game and play some cards, see what develops, and then, as per usual, come back, talk about some hands that unfolded over the course of the next 2 hours. So I'll be right back. All right, so we're not exactly in the exact same spot that I said we would be in, but a couple hands to run through real quick. I'm actually gonna switch it up and go elsewhere. I was playing in the 5-10 game. There was a must move into 2 main games. Main games look so-so. First semi-interesting hand, there's I guess early or middle position open to $40.
Hey, how many favorable props you got today?
We got 1 or 2.
1 or 2?
Yeah, man.
I'm gonna head in and get 1 or 2 myself.
Do it.
Scott S, give me a shout out.
Scott, shout out to Scott. So early position open to 40. I call on the button with ace-9 of diamonds, and the big blind calls as well. Flop comes queen, queen, jack with a flush draw. Action checks to me. I check it back with ace high. Turn is a brick. Action checks to me again, and seeing as how I do have ace high, but it's not a very good ace high. I still lose to an ace king or an ace 10 type hand. I decide to turn it into a bluff, and I put out a bet. The big blind pretty quickly check raises to some number around $250 or $300. Gotta let it go. Next interesting hand, there's a middle position limp. I look down at pocket deuces on the button, decide to raise it up rather than limp in, and I make it $40 to go. The big blind and the limper call, so 3 ways to a flop. Flop comes pretty favorable for us. Flop comes ace, jack, deuce. action checks to me and I put out a bet of $70. Both players call. Turn is the queen of clubs, which brings a backdoor flush draw on board. Action checks to me again, and this time I bet $240. Only the big blind calls this time. Heads up to a river card, which is total brick. Action checks to me again. This time I put out a bet of 530, something like that. 530 or 560. He thinks for a little while and then he folds. So no value there on the river. So yeah, I basically hit and ran for a very small win here. Into the game for $2,000, out of the game for $23.09. So $309 profit. Main games looked mediocre, so gonna get a quick change of scenery here, cruise over to the Bellagio, see what we see. Let's go. You know what's gonna be really fun is when we get a nice change of scenery. That's gonna be fun. There's gonna be a couple changes of scenery coming up on this very vlog. Believe you me, it's gonna happen. But for now, back at the Bellagio. Much later. You don't want to know what time it is. You can tell it's daytime though. That much is obvious. That's a running theme in these vlogs. From nighttime into daytime. Daytime becomes bedtime. Pretty standard, really. I don't know if I've mentioned it before. I think I might have, but I'm not positive. But there's this issue that I have since starting the vlog. Obviously, the time at the actual poker table, the poker grinding time, is drastically reduced due to all of the time that the vlog takes. All of which I thoroughly enjoy, don't get me wrong. However, all of that takes up a lot of time. So the issue is I end up spending much less time at the poker table. So when I do sit down at the poker table and I find myself in a pretty good game, it's very difficult to leave that game until that game breaks or is no longer good, or I am just too exhausted. As long as the game is good, I'm gonna want to stay there, because it's gonna be a bunch more time. There's a bigger gap in between my sessions due to all the other things that have to get taken care of so that this vlog can continue. So it's very tough for me to leave a game, particularly when it's good. And, you know, when you play in the graveyard hours, chances are you're gonna be able to find a pretty good game. Tonight's game was pretty good. That doesn't necessarily mean things are always gonna go your way, obviously, when the game is good. Let's jump into some hands here. First interesting hand, early position opens for 30. I call with 10-9 suited in the cutoff. Big blind calls as well, so we find ourselves in a three-way flop, which comes 10-6-5 with a flush draw. There's one check in the initial raiser bet 60. I make the call, the other player folds. Turn is an offsuit 5. He checks it over to me, and I just decide to play a little pot control here, and I check it back. River is an offsuit 8. This time he bets $100. I think the price is way too good to consider anything other than a call. Raise seems senseless. Folding seems just way too tight. So shrug and call. Rolls over 7-5 of diamonds. In the next hand, there's an early position raised to 30. There's two calls, and I look down at King 7 of hearts in the big blind. I think it's okay getting this price. Closing the action, suited king, worth a call in my opinion. So I toss it in, and we go to a flop 4 ways. pretty good flop for us, I think. Flop comes king 8-3 with 2 hearts. I check, the initial raiser checks. The first caller, he puts out a bet. He bets $60. I make the call and the other players fold. Turn is an offsuit 5. I check and the other player checks back. River's an offsuit 8. Don't think there's too much value in me betting a weak king with no kicker, so I check it over to him again. This time he does not check. He puts out a bet, $220. I wouldn't expect him to bet at 8 too often on the flop. Perhaps some percentage of the time, but it seems like it's a better card for my range than it is for his. It's kind of awkward to be betting second pair on the flop like that. Not always, but it seems like there's plenty of other combos, some misdraws that he could have in his range. So, with that in mind, I toss in the call. Sure enough, rolls over an 8. 8-7 suited. Sigh. All you can do. Sigh. Sigh and muck. Another sigh and muck. So in the next hand, action folds around to the button, opens it up for 30. I look down at ace-9 in the big blind, and I defend with an ace. Tough to fold an ace in the big blind for the 3x open, from the button especially. His range should be super wide. Ace-9 rates to be the best hand here, so I go ahead and defend, and we see a flop heads up. Again, flop comes pretty good for our hand. 9-7-3. Flop, top pair, top kicker. I check it over to him, and he bets $50. Obviously not going anywhere, so I toss in the call. Turn is a king. I check it over to him, and he overbets a little bit. He bets $220. Obviously a better card for him, for his range, than it is for mine. I think he's someone that is obviously well aware of that, and could very well be using this card as a bluff card, as a scare card. The price is a little bit unfortunate. He can put us in some tough spots, but I think it's a little bit too weak to fold just yet, especially considering ace-9 also block ace-king. Maybe if he had like king, queen, king, jack, he might bet a little bit less. Who knows? Maybe a little bit of speculation on my part, but blocking ace-king, I think it's okay to go ahead and make the call here, and that's what I do. River's an offsuit 7. So it pairs the board, pairs the second card on the flop. I check it to him, and this time he bets $530. A little bit sketchy here. A little bit sketchy of a situation. So there's reasons for calling and reasons for folding. Reasons for folding, I happen to have the ace of hearts in my hand, so it eliminates a bunch of his potential barreling holdings. There was a flush draw on board, a heart flush draw on the flop. Makes it a little bit less likely that he happens to have a flush draw. Reasons for calling, 7 shouldn't be in his range too often, I wouldn't think. Again, one of those spots where it seems a little bit unlikely for him to bet a 7 on the flop, but not completely unreasonable. I think there's got to be some percentage of the time though that he checks back a pair of 7s on the flop. Again, we block ace-king, and I'm not sure if he would bet 3 streets with a pair of 10s, jacks, queens. I think he might pause, especially given his bet sizing on the turn. Those hands might seem a little less likely to me. So I go into standard Andrew mode, toss in the call, and he shows us king-9. King-9 offsuit. So we get a little bit unlucky there on the turn with him just snapping off that 3-outer on us. And then I go into my, old stationy mode and just call down. Pretty stationy, I think. So again, I think having the ace of hearts is a positive and a negative. Block some flush draws, but also block ace-king. I think I could probably get away from a pair of 9s on the river. I don't mind the turn call at all, but on the river, so yeah, running not so hot, especially in the early going and well into the middle/wee hours of the morning. Is it the wee hours of the night or the morning? More action though, more action to come. Now playing 4-handed. I'm always a fan of playing short-handed. And in this instance, playing 4-handed, and the under the gun player opens for 30. I look down to pocket kings on the button. There are certain circumstances in play that will cause me to flat call, particularly based on who's in the game and who's opening and who is yet to act behind me. So in this exact instance, I decide on a flat call. It's very non-standard. I would almost always 3-bet here in this spot. on paper especially. But I decided on a flat call here to bring in 1 or 2 players behind me, let them try and make a play at the pot, or at least come into the pot, because I think there's probably more value in doing that than there is in 3-betting this initial raiser. So I make the call, and the other 2 players behind me call as well. So 4 ways to a flop. At least the flop comes pretty favorable for us. Flop comes king, queen, 4 with 2 clubs. Top set, city. Population, us. There's 2 checks, and the initial raiser puts out a bet. Bet $60. I decide to under-rep my hand. Certainly could make a case for raising on a semi-wet flop, but I decide to not over-rep my hand since there's players behind me. Top set, we block some of his range, his continuing range. This board should be better for his range than it is mine, so I don't want to prevent him from continuing to tell his story. So I flat call and the other 2 players fold. Turn's not really my favorite card, turns an offsuit 9, so it completes the most obvious straight draw, Jack 10, but at least it doesn't bring in a flush card. The initial raiser keeps betting. He bets $120 this time. Once again, and especially in this spot, I think it makes the most sense to flat call here rather than put in a raise now that there's potential straight on board. So I flat call, and we're heads up to a river card, which is a very interesting river card. 4 of clubs, completes the front door flush draw, and fills us up. Nut full house. Also, good news incoming. He doesn't stop betting. Puts out another bet, pretty good sized bet. He bets $480. Now it's just a question of how much value can we get. I just decide on a number. I decide on $1,080. He thinks for a little bit, kind of eyes my stack. Doesn't really think too long though. And he tosses in the call. So that's pretty clear news that we are winning this hand. Some run good comes our way after a pretty long stretch of run bad and potential play bad. So I'm never going to not admit to that, of course. But some clear run good happening in this hand. I suspect I might have cooled him slightly. I give him at least a flush on the river there, and I think that's a pretty good flush. One more really interesting hand. This one is a fun one for sure. Still playing 4-handed here. The under the gun player opens the pot, makes it $30. Both players on his left call, and I look down at pocket 10s in the big blinds. 10s feels like a fairly premium hand here, playing 4-handed. Happy to put in a 3-bet here. I make it $160 to go. The initial raiser calls. The player on his left calls. And then the small blind puts in a 4-bet. He makes it $400 to go. The initial raiser has maybe somewhere around $800 to $1,000. Myself and the small blind are somewhere around $1,800 effective. So it's a very, very weird spot. If I flat call here, it seems like there's a decent chance that the initial raiser could jam all in. That would reopen the betting for the small blinds, who could then jam all in as well. So we run the risk of getting pushed out of the pot. That's if we decide to fold, should all those events unfold in that manner. Another dimension that's added into this this strange hand is the fact that he didn't 3-bet when action first came to him, just flatted the initial raise. The player who opened the pot has been giving some action here and there, probably not the tightest player on the table. So the small blind player should be looking to put in some more, he should be looking to get some more value if he has a very strong hand. He should be 3-betting in that spot pretty much always. I would be shocked if he did not 3-bet with a strong hand in this spot, especially from out of position, especially facing an open from this player in particular. So it's a question of 5-betting or flat calling and allowing the action to proceed as I suspect it might. So if I put in a 5-bet, there's the potential that it folds out the weaker part of the small blind's range. The initial raiser looked like he was considering a 4-bet after I had 3-bet. He settled on a flat call. It looked like he went back and forth, but he was never folding. He kind of slid his chips all together and then thought a little bit and then decided on a flat call. So he was never folding his hand at any point. So if I put in the 5-bet, we basically fold out all of the weaker parts of the small blind's range. So with that in mind, I decide on a flat call. The initial raiser does go ahead and jam all in, somewhere between 800 and 1,000, probably closer to 1,000.
Player in his left folds, small blind. Sure enough, jams all in for $1,800. I give a little bit of pause just to assess the situation a little bit once more. It's not easy putting in $1,800, whatever it was, with pocket tens. But I think I was pretty resigned to it. It took me a little while to sort of assess the 4-bet, because it's such a weird spot for him to put in that back raise 4-bet, and it's just so unlikely that he has a big hand there. So with all of that in mind, $1,800 per person is going in. I go ahead and call. This time I ask if they want to run it twice. It's one of the rare occasions that I ask if they want to run it twice. They do. Both players agree to run it twice. Board runs out, the first board runs out ace, queen, 10 high. Second board runs out all low cards. All hands are shown. Turns out the small blind, getting a little frisky there with pocket eights. The initial raiser had the most premium of the hands. Turns out he had pocket queens. So there's a little bit of a side pot between me and the small blind. Pocket queens are going to be scooping the main pot. We flop set over set, set under set on the first run out. We don't improve versus the pocket queens, but we scoop the side pot versus the pocket eights. So all in all, we profit a little bit. Somewhat of a crazy hand. I'm happy that I didn't make some sort of a weird scared fold with the pocket tens, that's for sure, and sort of correctly assess the situation of him never 3-betting, always 3-betting the initial raiser with a better hand.
So after all was said and done, when we wrapped up the session, got into the game this time for $3,500, cash out of the game for $2,782, I think. We lose 718 here at the Bellagio. We win, what was it, like 307 at the Wynn. Comes out to a loss of somewhere around $400. Sunglasses time, sunglasses. Another one of those days, another one of those sessions where I could have run better, but I definitely could have played better in a couple spots. Made a couple call downs, reverted back to my old call station self, my old curious self. When I'm in those spots, it's not like I'm completely without reason for making a call. I always have various reasons where it's not completely terrible, even though I'm sure it looks completely terrible in some instances. You know, like when the second card pairs and it's unlikely that he's betting with that pair on the flop, when I have a blocker of some sort, when that comes into play. There was another hand that I didn't even get into where I called 2 streets with ace high and was correct. I called a $400 river bet with ace high. That turned out to be correct. I'm happy to share the times where I'm wrong, and I don't need to completely analyze every single hand and only include the ones where I'm right. I'm okay with it, as long as I have certain reasons for calling in these hands where I look like a station. It's a learning experience. Each one is a learning experience. Maybe next time I'll fold, next time the situation comes up, maybe. Maybe. It's a big maybe. I want to try and do another vlog before we get to stop number 1. But just in case I don't, it needs to be put out there. So, stop number 1, destination number 1 for the vlog is none other than London, England. That's right, we're going overseas again, back to Europe. Really looking forward to showing you guys around London. Can't wait to get back there, and we're gonna play a tournament. 888 has invited us again. We're off to London for the 888 event there. The tournament has a shot clock, so that's gonna be really interesting and really fun, and not to mention, there's a lot of pubs. There's a lot of pubs in London. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but there are a lot of pubs. So we're flying there. Boosie's coming with me. You guys are coming with me. We're all going to London. next Tuesday. That's happening on Tuesday, and we'll be there for about a week. And after that, we're going almost directly to California. There's an event at the Hollywood Park Casino. It's their 1-year anniversary since the remodel. I've shown you guys around the Hollywood Park Casino before. So they're having a little anniversary party. We're gonna go over there. We're gonna play a couple tournaments. That's on October 21st and 22nd. All of you guys who are in the Los Angeles and surrounding area should come hang out at that event. The anniversary event, there's 2 tournaments. I think they're $340, $50K guarantee each. I'm gonna be hopping into those, and we're all gonna hang out, have some fun in Los Angeles, gamble it up. If you can join me for that one, that'd be awesome. If you're in London and you can join me, also awesome. Last but not least, we're gonna be doing the live stream game here at the Bellagio this coming Sunday. Last time we had the tip jar out. We raised a little over $1,200 for some hurricane relief efforts. Tip jar is coming back in a very important purpose once again. Whatever people are able to drop into the tip jar to help out some families that were affected by this madness that happened this week in Las Vegas, that would be very much appreciated. Come by, say hi. If anyone wants to hop in the game with us, it's gonna be 5510 again. Shoot me or Brad a message. Either way, come join us, come say hi. That'll be on the Bellagio live stream this Sunday. Lots coming up, lots happening. We're basically at the 1-year anniversary of this vlog. There's been some highs, there's been some lows. I expect much more of the same, and extremely excited about things to come. Looking forward to all of it, and looking forward to taking this vlog into new places and taking all of you guys along with me.